right, well, let's go ahead. I'm just here to welcome you and get everyone started. I'm now going to turn the stage over to Manny.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go.
And Ruthe is our guest tonight. She is a former movie critic and journalist with the San Francisco Chronicle. And as you all will see, she has a lot of juicy stories to share about some of our favorite actors, matinee idols, and blockbuster heroes. So thank you all so much.
Sure, go.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Precious. And yes, let's bring our guest of the evening, Ruthe Stein, up to the stage. And let's give her a big welcome and round of applause, everyone. And Ruthe, we have a mic right behind you. Yeah, well, then for the folks on Zoom, I know we have a lot of folks who have logged in on Zoom. It's sometimes easier for them.
My voice carries.
Yes. Well, what was that thing you said about the E in your name?
For some reason, my mother stuck an E on the end of my first name. And so I once in life, when I was a kid, I was Ruthe, and then I decided I was too sophisticated to be Ruthe. I became Ruth. But now I'm like back. I don't like to people call me Ruthe so much anymore. But John Carroll, I hope you all still remember, the wonderful columnist for the Chronicle. He once said about me that the E is silent, but Ruthe is not.
Love that. I love non-silent women. My mother is watching, so hi, Mom. Speaking of which,
Hi, Manny's mom.
this is the book, everyone, and it is so incredible. It's called Ruthe Stein Sitting Down with the Stars, Interviews with 100 Hollywood Legends.
And I have to tell you that the Chronicle book critic, who actually gave it quite a nice review, but he said the title should be Interviews with 99 Hollywood Legends and Timothée Chalamet.
Oh my God, I would concur with that. We're gonna talk about Timothée Chalamet. So I thought one way to go about this, Ruthe, if you allow it, is I have specific questions about, I picked a small smattering of the 100, and then I want to just get your thoughts on the industry, your life, and just ask you some general questions, and then we're gonna throw it to you all for your questions for Ruthe Stein. So first, Cary
And
Grant.
I want to say that you can ask me absolutely anything. The reason I'm saying this is because it's one of the bane of the existence of people who do what I do, is that you're always being confronted with, you can talk to me, Farrell, but you can't talk to her about Woody Allen. And Oprah told me that when she interviewed with Elizabeth Taylor, she was told she couldn't ask about any of her husbands. And when she interviewed Priscilla Presley, she was told she couldn't ask her about Elvis. So I want you to know you can ask me anything.
Okay, be careful because I will. Why don't we start? Let's start softball. I just want to hear some stories from you. Let's talk about first about Cary Grant. One of the first people you talk about in the book, someone that I've been a big fan of for a long time. What was it seemed like it was an interview that really affected you. It was close to one of his last. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I also want to just mention that TCM on the 30th of this month is doing a whole day of Cary Grant movies.
Nice.
So
do you have a favorite?
I suppose, an affair to remember is that you tacky.
No. That's a
But you
favorite
know,
one too.
he was sort of wonderful in everything, but in the 40s, the Philadelphia Story, Bringing Up Baby, he was magic on the screen. As Audrey Hepburn said to him in a movie that they did together, she said, "You know what's wrong with you?" He said, "What?" And she said, "Absolutely nothing."
Did you get a sense from him when you met him that he was actually a queer man?
If you're asking me if he was gay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But did you get that sense from him?
Because he could say, you know, he was a queer man.
Well, or I guess that's today's
Yeah,
terms.
no, I did.
In his terms, that he had a long time.
First of all, when I met him, he was in his 70s already, and I think, and he was married many times, as we know. And I've heard all those stories about him and Randolph Scott, and I've seen the incriminating photos and footage and everything. Who knows what he did when he was a young man? I mean, and really at that point, who cares? You know?
I just said someone to admire.
But I know I didn't get any kind of sexual vibe from him at all. So I mean, I was in my 20s and he was in his 70s.
Right.
So it wasn't like, you know, This wasn't the Cary Grant of an affair, remember, that I was talking to.
Right.
But he was very conscious of his image and, decided to retire, I think in sort of in his early 60s, because he knew that the movies were going to be around forever, and he wanted people to have the image of the Cary Grant from the 1940s.
Right, that memory of him.
And so he couldn't be talked out of it, and he became a spokesperson for Chanel or one of those big companies, but he wanted to keep active, and it's a very funny story about how I came to meet him, and people like him, not too many of them, and Josephine Baker and Faye Ray who were in the book, all just were sort of gifts, but they were much older when I talked to them. I'm not that old. People say Faye Ray, my God. So people say, "Oh, who's a friend?" All the critics said, "What about D.W. Griffin? Did you talk to D.W.?"
Oh God.
So what happened was he was trying to think about how to fill his time. He's a very curious guy in the sense of wanting to always learn about things and everything. And Gregory Peck and a couple of other his contemporaries have been doing these lectures, just chats on college campuses and traveling around and talking about their career. And that interested him. He told me he didn't want to write a book because people just want to know who you slept with, which is the way we started this conversation.
Right.
So he didn't want to do that, but he wanted to do something. So there's a junior college down in the Peninsula, and I was scheduled to interview Steve Allen, who was supposed to be talking there that night. And my editor came over to my desk around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she said, "Well, Steve Allen is taken ill and he's not coming." And I said, "Oh, well, that's too bad." He said, "But Cary Grant is substituting for him." And I said, "Oh, come on," But it was true. I mean, he had the same agent, I think, as Steve Allen, and when this opportunity presented itself, he just decided to go for it. He's living in Los Angeles, he's going to get up here. So I actually saw the first time that he was ever on stage, and it was very sweet because he didn't know if he'd have enough to say, so he brought some favorite poetry with him.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And he was conscious of his age, and he related a conversation he had with Jimmy Stewart about how every year there are fewer and fewer of them around. He compared it to the Civil War veterans and the veteran parade,
Wow.
There were none.
I'm sure there's many, but I want to move on to the next video. I want to get to a lot of the stories. Tell me about spending time with Audrey Hepburn and her suite of the family.
Oh yeah, wow. Well, Audrey Hepburn is the favorite of the family, and we watch Roman Holiday at least 3 or 4 times a year. And so what was really great was that I got my husband and my stepdaughter to meet her as well. But she came in because she was doing something for UNICEF. That's how she spent the last part of her career. I was traveling around the world. She was always interested in children and bettering their situation. And so she agreed to do this, and it was a very exhausting thing for her. But she invited me up to her room, and she had all of her makeup and all her hair stuff just strewn all over the table. And she said she had just gotten used to doing her hair and makeup herself. She described herself as a one and all gal. She could do everything. And she was wearing her hair, we all remember that pixie cut when she got her hair cut on the holiday, which was wearing her very long, because she said it was much easier for her to take care of it that way. She could just pull it back, and that's what she did. She just had it in like a bun on top of her head and stuff. And she showed me all this, and she was just how can I put it? She was just such a girly girl, I mean, she was into the makeup and that. But the thing that I remember most from that evening, I had interviewed her, and then there was this dinner, which was a fundraiser for UNICEF. Frank Jordan, our one-time mayor, introduced her as Catherine Hepburn.
No.
Yeah.
What?
She didn't bat an eyelash. She just came up on stage and she didn't even correct him or anything. But the other thing I remember, which makes me sad, because she died really young of cancer. She was a terrible smoker. I mean, she had a cigarette that she kept behind her. I remember this, as she was sitting at the table, and the cigarette was behind her, so it wouldn't bother anyone, and then she would take puffs on it. And I'm sure that's what killed her.
Nice.
She really did die young, but she was just charming and just just exactly the way you want Audrey Hepburn to be.
Okay.
Some stars may disappoint, but she did not. Neither did Cary Grant. So.
Tell me about going to a concert with Grace Kelly as her guest.
Well,
Princess
actually,
Grace Kelly.
Well, I didn't exactly go to the concert with Princess Grace. It was a concert of benefit that I was invited to.
But you said that she didn't want to leave your side.
No, well, this is true. I was invited to the party in her private apartments, and I met her husband, and I think one of the kids was there and everything. But she did spend a lot of time talking to me, which I thought was a little strange because there were all these people who were given these huge sums of money to be able to meet her and everything. But I learned later that the people from Monaco thought the French was really terrible, and they would mock her. And so whenever there was anybody, an American around, she would want to talk English to them. And so it wasn't like it was me. But I do remember that night that literally at midnight the party ended, and it was like being thrown out of the palace, you know. And
Wow.
and we talked quite a bit about her career and why she decided she wasn't going to go back, and she had been tempted a couple of times, but she felt so responsible for bringing up the children, and then I always thought, well, they didn't really turn out all that well, so she might as well go ahead and movies.
We're gonna take it into the more modern age. Tell me about Madonna and her grabbing your tape
Oh
recorders.
yeah.
And it's causing you to stop fidgeting with them. What happened there?
That's exactly what happened. When someone like Madonna, I mean.
I'm sorry, Graham, can we actually up Ruth's mic just a little bit? I know you put it down, but can you up her mic a little bit? Because I don't want her to have to hold it right by her mouth.
Okay. Is this good? Are we good now?
I'm just gonna have Graham up it just a little bit.
Oh, okay, so you want me to?
Just keep going, Graham. No, you're good.
Keep going. So, you only have the tape when you're done with the interview. I mean, if anything happens to the tape, you don't have a story, it's because I stopped taking notes. I lost a lot of really wonderful people the first decade because I was taking notes and didn't have the tape. So my tape started in 1980. But for people like Madonna, I took 2 tape recorders because you never know. And one time I tape recorded did break, but that only happened once. But that was more my compulsive, whatever. So I kept checking to make sure that they were working. I mean, let's say they were over here or something, and I would keep looking and say, but she grabbed them away and said, stop it, and she put them over there. But the other story I wanted to tell was that she had endorsed a lipstick. It was for Avita. And I went and got the lipstick and I wore it, and she was wearing it too, and like we didn't say anything about it, but it was like being sort of in a sorority. We were both wearing the Madonna lipstick. I have to say, she was very pleasant. She had her baby, it was just like 6 months old, and she brought the baby with her, and she was going into a soft motherly period, and she was just fun. She answered all my questions. She wasn't difficult.
Now Julia Roberts. I'm just such a huge fan of hers.
And you know she has a house.
I do. In Presidio Heights. I just learned that. So first of all, I
don't go over there or anything.
Maybe we should. Maybe you should. I don't know. So what was it like interviewing her?
Well,
you talked about how she was just like, she came out of the limo and she had this ethereal quality to her, and
no, I think you're confusing with someone else.
The black and gray.
No. So she is one of those super actresses and actors who don't give interviews usually to the daily press. They've gone beyond that. So I got to grab people like Adam Sandler and George Clooney when they were still deigning to be interviewed by the press, by newspapers. But she hadn't done it for decades, but she came back into television. I guess it didn't work very well because I don't think she's done anything after that, but she was on this TV series. And so because of that, I had a chance to talk to her. And she was, I don't think she said anything particularly interesting about her work or anything, but I did ask her about, she had, as all of us follow fan magazines now, she had sort of disastrous romances and breaking up weddings the day before she's supposed to get married, and they called her the Runaway Bride because she's in a movie called The Runaway Bride. But she seemed to know what she wanted, even though he was married to someone else at the time. She met this cameraman and they stayed married, and I actually have a friend who whose brother has a home next door to them in Hawaii, and she says they're really tight together, you know, and she just stays home and bakes cookies and does all these things around the house and everything. So when I asked her about that, that was really the only time that I thought she said anything that really seemed sort of touching, when she said, you know, she said something like it was so wonderful that she almost didn't want to jinx it by talking about it, and that's sincere to me, and you know, so I didn't come away with any real sense of who she was, except maybe for that last comment.
Thank you for that. I only have a couple more, and then I want to get into some broader questions. Timothée Chalamet. So you interviewed him relatively early in his career, though.
Well,
his career is pretty-
after
the movie with Woody Allen.
No, well, after the movie that made him stars, Say My
Right.
Name. So
Call Me by Your Name,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So he was definitely famous when
Right.
But this is one, I have this thing, and I really like to talk to actors when they're just starting out, because they're kind of fresh, and they aren't being whispered, publicists aren't whispering in your ear all the time trying to know what you're supposed to say. And I guess kind of a sense of them, but with Timothée Chalamet, it was kind of an awkward thing, because he really didn't know how to handle things, and he had just been in this Woody Allen movie, and then all of this dirt about Woody Allen got dragged out again, and Woody Allen became persona non grata everywhere, and Chalamet did this weird thing, which I guess the publicist must have told him to do. He gave back his salary for the movie, which I don't quite get what the connection is with that. But so I asked him about it, and all the publicists came down on me then, and I mean there were too many publicists in the room. I usually don't allow that. They all went by really fast, and didn't have a chance to protest it. But he didn't know what to do. I mean, he didn't know, he couldn't, like if there had been a George Clooney, he would have made a joke out of it. But he was clearly just extremely uncomfortable, because he didn't know. I mean, he probably had a pretty decent experience making the movie with Woody. Most actors I talked to loved working with him. But now he's been put in this position to be said anything nice about Woody. He was a child molester or something. So I felt kind of sorry for him.
Do you understand what all the hype is about now? You know, with Dune and with French Dispatch, he's become like one of the hottest stars around.
Yeah.
Did you see it then?
I saw it in that movie, in the Italian movie.
Call Me by Your Name.
Call Me by Your Name.
So you predicted it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, didn't anyone that saw that film could just see what, of course, I also thought Hammer was pretty hot in that. That didn't work out too well.
No.
But oh yeah, I could definitely see. The movie that I actually talked to him about was he played a drug addict, and it was
Beautiful boy.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
Yeah, it was.
You didn't like it?
I did like it, but it was kind of, and it was an admirable choice for him to do, because it was a controversial movie, and you know that was an instance. I usually don't like to get the actors to talk about their films, because that's what they want to do, and that's what they're plugging and everything, and then that's when they start sounding like robots. But then, because it was about drugs, it kind of opened the door for me to talk to him about his own experience growing up, because he lived in New York, and he talked about his parents and how, you know, close they were, and how he really feels he's able to avoid a lot of those temptations because he could always go and talk to his parents. So those were pretty interesting quotes to me, and so.
Anyone else here see Beautiful Boy?
I don't think that was a problem.
No.
Nobody went to see it.
No, I love that movie.
Yeah, it was.
See it.
It was actually he gave a very good
Yeah, it was
performance
powerful.
too.
And
It was Steve Carell, right?
Steve Carell, yeah. Okay, I just have two more. Tea with Whitney Houston.
Oh, yeah, well, she was
Tell
drinking,
me-
she was drinking tea. I wasn't drinking it.
She was drinking tea and you went and met her.
She was having tea drinking tea because of her voice. She was trying to conserve her voice because she was doing multitude of interviews, and she had come for the sneak preview of Waiting to Exhale, and I actually waited outside for her to go in, and she was like the last person to go in because she didn't want anyone to know that she was there, and she had a babushka in her head, and she was still Whitney Houston. But then I talked to her the next day, and she was pretty cold and not very forthcoming about anything. But it was interesting. She had that huge success with the Bodyguard movie, and then she didn't make a movie for a number of years. And when she did do this Waiting to Exhale, it was she wasn't quite the star, but there were like 5 actresses who all had pretty equal hearts in. So I kind of thought maybe she was a little scared still of this movie business. And I do know that Kevin Costner really helped her out a lot with Bodyguard. Probably she wouldn't have been able to be as strong and if it hadn't been for him, for him being supportive and stuff. So I think she felt that she wasn't on solid ground. I mean, she was so successful as a singer from the time when she was really young, and I think this was something that was still a challenge and she wasn't too sure about, and she was insecure, but she was definitely chilly, and the tea was only. I can tell you all stories about how I'm watching people eat. Nobody ever asked me if I wanted even a cup of tea, but that's a whole other story. Robert Redford was so funny because he was eating this salad and he had a piece of lettuce in his tooth afterwards. And I thought, well, that's nice. Robert Redford's not perfect.
Ruthe, I am sorry, actually, for the folks on Zoom, because the mic is close to your mouth, it's getting muffled on Zoom. I wanted to make it easier for you, but maybe get a couple inches away.
Okay.
Just so that all the folks who are tuning in digitally can hear. Thank you, Ram and Precious, for bringing that to our attention.
Okay. Is this good? Can I not?
Yeah. Like this, kind of like, yeah, just maybe
Like
two-
this?
Yeah,
Like
two-
this,
like 2
okay.
or 3 inches away.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So then, last one is about Robin Williams, and you end the book with Robin Williams, and you talk about actually how sad it is to write about Robin Williams in the past tense.
Yeah, talk about how sad it is to drive through that tunnel.
Yeah.
I don't want to remember it was a tunnel, he was just the sweetest. And he was so giving. I mean, even in interviews, he would go into telling jokes. Those are the tapes all my friends always want to listen to, because he would just start spinning, and the way his mind worked, you could almost not even keep up with him. But the story that I told, because it was so unusual in all the 50 years that I was interviewing people, is that after we had done the interview and it went well, I actually had a chance to talk to Robin a number of times because he was local, but this particular time we were in Los Angeles. So I'm out there waiting for the van to go back to the airport, and he's waiting for the limo, and I have the Phil Roth book and I'm reading it, and he comes over on his own volition and says that he's a Phil Roth fan, and we start to talk like human beings to one another about, well, what's your favorite book and why do you like him? And I said, as far as I can recall, that's the only exchange I've ever had with any of the 100 or 99 celebrities that are in the book, which was like something that you might do with just a normal person. He suddenly wasn't a celebrity. And he had that ability to do that. And I remember the day that I found out he died. I was just so bummed out. He's someone that I didn't really know him. I wasn't his friend, but you just felt what a mensch he was. And I always thought that he shouldn't have divorced his second wife, the nanny, because I think I used to see them in functions, and I always felt that she took care of him and she was really watching out for him. And he kind of fell apart after that. So, I don't know this really. I don't know anyone who said that or whatever, but I did used to observe them in events, and she was very protective of him. She wouldn't let him get too close to him. She was a nanny,
Right. So, wow. Thank you for taking us on that very, very brief tour with just a small snippet of some of the people in this book. Really incredible that you were able to interview all these folks. What an amazing career. I guess the first question is, who's going to be the next James Bond?
I happen to be very, very lucky because I interviewed Daniel Craig for another movie, a movie called, I think it was called Mother. We had an affair with a much older woman, and it was right when all this buzz was going on, and he was really open. He said he was he would be the person, and he didn't get it. He would always be the person to get to play James Bond. He was very funny.
Hold the mic lower.
I think he got much more guarded later on, obviously. And just ironically, I talked to Pierce Brosnan with his first film, and I love Pierce. That's why I put him on the cover, but he doesn't know how much publicity he's getting. But he was. I thought he was like really also. There's something about the Irish. They're just so they just seem much more real, the Irish actors,
Yeah.
and I certainly felt that with him, and he had a real tragedy because he lost his wife just about a year before the James Bond thing finally happened for him, and obviously they were very close, and he was emotional about it and started talking about how much she was just a going out kind of girl, and she would have loved to have gone to all these parties and done all these things, and he started to tear it up, and so I don't know who's gonna be the next James Bond.
Come on, Ruth, tell me.
You know, to be honest,
You know.
I don't, because I don't really follow all these younger actors so much anymore. I mean, I'm kind of in a different stage in my life, and I see some of these movies and like, I don't know anyone who's in them.
Right.
No, so I don't even know that I can make an educated guess. You know, I'm thinking they might be going ethnic because it's just sort of the thing to do right now. And
Going what?
well, they might want to go for a black person or an
Right,
Asian person
right,
or
right.
a person of color, Hispanic, or that seems to be the direction that a lot of studios are going in terms of trying to find actors. So that was going to be my only thought. But even at that, I couldn't say, you know, who would I like it to be? Chris Rock. It's not going to be Chris Rock.
And sorry, last reminder, Mike, right here, because we put this right here. It's like 4 inches away. Yeah, yes, perfect, right there.
Okay, right there.
What makes a good interviewer, and how do you get good answers out of a celebrity?
Well, I don't know that I have any great secrets, but I will tell you what always works for me. I'm a dogged researcher, and in the days of the internet, of course, that's easy, and you can find out all kinds of things about people. But for 35 years, there was no internet when I was doing this. No, 25 years, there was no internet when I was doing this. So I had to try to find all kinds of stories. I always tried to find stories in the New York Times. I just would do tons of research so that I almost always knew what the answer was going to be before person actually said it, and that way I could kind of trip them up if they ever did say something different from what they said before. I paid a lot of attention to the person that I'm interviewing, even if they're not looking at me. I'm always looking at them. I'm always have eye contact with them. I want them to feel that I am somebody in the room with them, because I know it's a revolving door, and when I leave, somebody else is going to come in. But I want them to feel that connection with me. And then I'm just not, for some reason, I'm not afraid to ask questions that other interviewers don't want to ask. I asked Jessica Lange if she and Sam Shepard were faithful to each other, and I asked Penelope Cruz if she was pregnant, and that question I didn't think was all that personal, but she got very upset. I can't believe you're asking me that. About 2 weeks later, she was pregnant, but so I'm not, I'm not fearful of it. I don't listen to publicists who say, don't ask about this, you can't ask about that. I figure the person's an adult, and if they don't want to answer it, then that's their business. But I'm not gonna avoid it because the publicist told me that I had to avoid it.
Speaking of which, I heard that you come from a gangster family. Is that true?
Well, my Are you just saying that, or you
No.
actually?
Someone told me that
Well, there's
it's a
some
matter of the public record that you come from, there's some connection to.
Well, my dad was a boxing promoter and a boxing manager in the days before boxing was on television. So the story I always heard is that he kind of got pushed out by the mafia.
Oh,
But
okay.
that, not that he was
I got
part
it.
of the mafia.
I see. So
But,
whoever
you know-
wrote that to me, you know who you are.
But
Just stop peddling lies on the internet.
But I don't really know. I was a little girl. I mean, things I remember is my dad used to train these boxers in Miami Beach during the summers. I don't know why, it was like 100 degrees, and so we went to Miami Beach every summer for like 8 or 9 years. It was really wonderful, and these boxers would be sweating, and so that's what I remember. And I remember going to the Marigold Gardens, which was the boxing ring in Chicago. And my dad used to fly all over the place. He was quite a character. He wore chartreuse slacks and orange slacks, and but I don't mean. My one cousin who just passed away, who was older than me, and I not maybe about 5 years ago, I sort of had that conversation with him. But there's nothing. I've never found any.
Okay,
anything.
well, we'll leave it there. I want to ask you how, so
You didn't ask about my mother though.
is she going to the one?
She was a librarian.
Oh, well, maybe librarian by day. You occupied and occupy a role that has been very important in the film and movie industries. That is someone who's able to get access and translate who these people really are to the public. You've done it for a while. Now we have things like Instagram and Facebook where celebrities are documenting their own lives from their own homes.
Yes,
going out.
changed so much.
Just
Right?
how.
And also, I mean, this is actually something that one of the people who wrote about my book mentioned. I think they're much more fearful about what they say because they know it's going to have such wide exposure after they say it. So I don't think people were as cautious in most of my experiences as they are now, as afraid. And it reminds me, Robert Downey Jr. said a very interesting thing. Not to me, I heard on Stephen Colbert about, how did he get over having been in prison and that crazy thing when he ran and walked into a stranger's house and went into the bedroom or something. He said, well, one of the reasons was it was before the internet. So there's no film, there's no proof of that. People can't Google him and see all these wild and crazy things that he did. So I think that's made an enormous difference now in the whole interviewing process. It was much more intimate when I was doing it. And can I tell my Al Pacino story? Because I
was going to tee you up for that. Please go ahead. Tell Al Pacino.
I just love this. You know how you sometimes think of something clever to say about an hour after you were supposed to say it? Well, this time I did not fail myself. I loved Al Pacino. I totally loved him. He was just this bundle of energy. He walked into the room and he started opening up all the windows and then he was going to paint some walls and he was like he was just like you couldn't control him, just exactly the way you would think he would be from his films and everything. So after he got through decorating the room, he turned around and looked at me and he said, have we met? You look familiar. And I looked at him and said, really? And you look familiar too. That was almost going to be the title of my book, but then we felt it would take too much explaining for it to
And you look familiar too.
And you look familiar too.
That's funny. So how if you were to start today and do what you did, how would you do it? I mean, what instruction would you give to someone who's reporting on celebrity and Hollywood culture in the era of Instagram and social media?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's changed so much. Now that I don't think it's as much fun because you can't really get scoops because the stars, as you say, are scooping themselves.
Right, exactly.
So I'm glad I just feel so privileged and so lucky to have been there for the last several great decades. Newspapering, I started in 1970. I love newspapers, and it's sad to me that you can't even find a Chronicle anymore. My corner grocery store stopped carrying it last year. So I just feel like my timing on everything was just great, including being able to meet these wonderful people. Like in the old days at San Francisco International, some of you remember, they had so many stars come. There weren't as many film festivals, and they weren't coming to plug movies. They were just sort of coming, and that's how I got to talk to Alec Guinness and Ginger Rogers and Joanne Woodward and also they were all writing their memoirs, and so I got to talk to Michael Caine and Sidney Poitier. So my timing just seemed, really, really good. And the one thing I always think about with Sidney Poitier is that he talks extremely slowly and he pauses a lot. And I never was sure if he had stopped on that topic and I should just go in with another question, or if I waited a minute or two, we'll see. So there were all these pauses in the tape that make me laugh when I see them that much today. But he was really terrific. But because they were talking to me, having written their memoirs, they were much more open about their lives than they were if they had to plug a movie, for example. Right. So.
Okay, well, this is my last question, then we'll get to audience questions. And Mother, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the Zoom chat. If you could repeat just one of these 100 interviews again today, if you could go back and say, I can sit down with one more of these people again, unlimited amount of time, no publicists in the room, you could ask whatever you want, Ruth, it's your show. Who would you do that interview with?
And I can bring them back from the dead.
Yes, you can resuscitate them, but only one.
Wow. Well, I suppose I have to say the first interview in the book and the last, Cary Grant and Robin Williams.
I gave you one. You can do two.
Oh, I had to do one. I want Robin to come back to life more. So because Cary Grant got to live a regular length of years. So I'd like to bring Robin back.
It's a good choice. A round of applause for Ruthe Stein. Let's get the audience questions in here. About 10 minutes or so. Go ahead.
Yeah, how do you get people to open up and not just talk about their movies, not just.
Yeah, well, that's really the trick.
and talk more
Well,
about-
it's a function of time. If I have, 45 minutes or an hour is an ideal amount of time for an interview, but sometimes I only have 20 minutes or so. So you gotta, I have to say, each interview is different in how to do it, but I always look for that moment when they've broached a subject that where I can sort of get in there and it doesn't seem like an off the wall kind of question. It kind of, it sort of fits like the Julia Roberts thing, when she mentioned something about her husband, and then I could say, oh, gosh, it seems like you have everything now, you've got the husband of your dreams and the kids and all that stuff, and she really related to that. So I'm always really present in the interview. And so I that's one way that I did it. I think generally that the people that I interviewed liked me, even if I was asking nosy questions, and I guess I feel that way because I got so many of them to comment on the book. I mean, I got Anne Margaret and Jeff Bridges and Jeff Daniels and Big Wood's daughter and Timothy Spall wrote a beautiful comment. And even the people who didn't comment, because they don't sort of do that, made a point of letting me know that they appreciate being in the book and everything. So, and the publicists, even though I was asking the nosy questions, they seemed to like me too because they helped me get these blurbs and everything. So I think I'm kind of likable. I'm kind of easy to talk to. And there's a flip side of that, in that the skills that I learned as a journalist, not just interviewing celebrities, because that wasn't all I did over 50 years. Otherwise, this would be interviews with 1,000 Hollywood legends. But I did all kinds of things at the Chronicle. I learned to talk to all, I interviewed Golda Meir and Jimmy Carter and a lot of people who, and many directors. I mean, almost all great directors I had a chance to interview, and those were fast. And I spent like an hour and a half talking to Francis Coppola and
Oh my God.
and learned a lot about movie making through the direct thing. But what was the question?
Well,
How do you get people to open up? Well, you just gotta make them feel that you're on their side. I mean, and it's not phony. When Pierce Brosnan got so emotional and stuff, I mean, I really felt that. I mean, I knew that was real. And when you get, when you start talking about life and death issues, I mean, I had an amazing interview with Michael Douglas a couple of years after he was diagnosed with having throat cancer, where he was talking all sort of cosmic kinds of stuff. Timothy Spall too had a bout with cancer where he thought he was going to die. And so when you get on topics like that, I don't think there's a way to fake interest. And I am interested and I'm very grateful that they feel comfortable enough talking to me that they would talk about subjects like that,
All right, we have a question from my mother. What was the most surprising thing you learned during an interview?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I should be prepared
And
for
who would
that.
you want to interview today? I guess I kind of asked the second one. What was the most surprising thing you've learned during an interview?
Well, this is something that everybody's been teasing me about, but I found Jerry Lewis kind of sexy. My husband made me temper that part of my story because he said people are going to think you really lost it. But you have to see him in his milieu. I talked to him. I went down to Los Angeles right before the marathon. We raised all that money for Jerry's kids, and there was a huge group of people who were working for him, and he just has such command of his position and, you know, who he was. And I tell people who laugh when I say that, watch King of Comedy again. The guy that he was, the talk show host, that's really the way I saw him that day. So I have to say that it certainly surprised other people. So I have to say that was one of the most surprising.
Got it. So a crush on Jerry Lewis. Go ahead.
Was there any celebrity that was unsettling to you?
Any celebrity that's unsettling to you?
Well, Philip Seymour Hoffman was very difficult, and later on wondered if he was on drugs. Honestly, I'm talking about people eating. He was eating so quickly that he was actually spitting the food out at me while he was talking.
Nice.
And he was very confrontational. He kind of mocked my questions. He's in the chapter about people who die too soon, and I started out by saying you're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but he was a very difficult person to talk to. I mean, I almost didn't want to be in the room with him. But he's a brilliant actor. I mean, and his son, interestingly, is in a movie coming out soon. It will be interesting to see if he inherited his father's talent. But I have to say that was probably it. And I talked to him 2 or 3 times. So I was unsettled each time that I had talked to him. So, yeah.
Okay, let's get one more question. The young individual in the back, the young, of course, is subjective matter. Relatively, I guess, to the median age of, I guess, the city.
Well, when I was coming in here tonight, my husband said, you know, you're going to be the oldest person in the room tonight.
No, not true.
I bet I am. How old do you think I am? How old do you think I am? I never lie
You're
about that.
younger than I am.
But how old do you think I am? You're afraid to answer that question. How old do you think I am?
Oh, I'm definitely not answering that question.
I just turned 76.
Wow, mazel tov. Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Am I not the oldest person in the room? I think I am.
You're not.
I'm not? Okay.
No, you're not. Okay, so there you go, Ruth.
Yes, to the youngest person in the room.
And if you have a question, you can actually ask question. Oh, you want? Go ahead.
No, you asked your question. I interrupted you. Go ahead. Ask it.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think is one of the most significant things when interviewing people from that kind of industry? How does it change them? What is specific?
So when you're interviewing people
from the movie industry, basically such big stars, does it have a very big influence on who they are as people, how they live their lives? Of course, except the obvious part.
and does it have an influence?
Does the interview have an influence on them?
On them?
Just
I don't think they even see it.
just the life in that atmosphere, just the life being a movie star, that kind of stuff. How does it change? Something.
How does it change me or change them? I don't think it changes them at all. I don't think they even remember who I am.
No, I think what he's trying to ask is, have you, how does fame change these people?
Well,
How
then
do you
I
think it's
then I have to sort of interview somebody at the beginning of the cycle of being famous and sort of at the end. Effect absolutely changes them. I'm remembering Cary Grant, who I happened to interview the afternoon right before he went out on that wasn't Hollywood Boulevard, on Sunset Boulevard, and he took the hooker. The joke was, how much did she pay him? But
Cute, Brad, he's so cute.
well, that's nobody could understand why he was doing this, but in my interview, which I think is one of my better interviews in the book, he talked about how nervous he was about all this, and suddenly he was being paid 10, 15 times what he'd ever earned in his life. And what if the movie didn't do well? And he was going around, he was with Elizabeth Hurley then, he was going around the room screaming at her. I mean, he was very open about his feelings, and so I wasn't surprised when that happened, because I think that was an outpouring of his fear and the tension that he was feeling, that he needed some relief from it, literally. So I think fame changes them enormously, and sometimes for the good. When we think about people like Paul Newman and Margaret Redford, who've done such wonderful things with their fame, and sometimes it destroys them, like Whitney Houston and Heath Ledger, any of those people that I wrote about in my sad last chapter. I loved Heath Ledger. He was such a nice, solid guy. And it was that I mean, when I meet these people and then they died so young. Natalie would too, I felt like, especially as I got to know her daughter a little bit. It is really almost like, even though we're not friends, it is almost like losing a friend.
Yeah, well, you really did end the book on a somber note with
Yeah.
that chapter, but it's important. I think I'm glad you did it in a way. Right, final comment of the
Oh,
evening.
it's just a comment. You mentioned, since I am older than you, I still do read the San Francisco Chronicle, and that's how I found out you were here tonight, and I'm gonna be reading, so I thought, I gotta see her, because I used to read you all the time.
How
I just
about
wanted
that?
to know,
Oh, that's very nice,
were
thank
you
you.
friends with Herb Cain at all, or?
Of course I knew from Kane. I once sat next to him at a dinner party, and he used a line that I can only imagine he used on hundreds of women in San Francisco. He said, we should go to an opening or a closing sometime.
Oh,
He was always very nice to me. He was very generous. I wrote a singles column in the late 1980s, and when the first column, he wrote me a note saying, congratulations, the column is really good. I saved a lot of his notes, and they were really nice that he took the time to do this. But I also have a sort of yucky hurricane story to tell. I couldn't have been more than like 25 or 26, and I went down in the elevator at the Chronicle with a bunch of other people, and Herb Cain looked at me and said very loudly, I can see your slip through that blouse.
ew.
And then I got on the elevator and I was a little bit shaken, and Dave Perlman, you all remember Dave Perlman, he said, oh, don't worry about that, that's just Herb, So yeah, that was not kind, but he was kind to people, and Herb Cain was such a presence in the city. I can remember going to a restaurant and they held a table the entire night just in case he might show up. And it's impossible to believe that a lot of people don't know who he is anymore. And they named Herb Cain Way along the Embarcadero. I think there's only still one sign still standing that says Herb Cain Way. And nobody talks about him. And there was no documentary that came out after he died, and there were no books. And he was like probably in some ways the most powerful person in San Francisco. So that ties in with the question about fame and how it changes people, I think. And I guess there could never really be another Herb Cain because we're such a diverse group of people.
He was unique, but they did honor him. The whole city is San Francisco.
Oh, no, I know I was there. I know they did that, but that was when he's still alive. I'm talking about in terms of the shelf life that he's had.
Yeah.
It hasn't been what you might expect.
Well, I want to thank you for a lifetime achievement, a career spanning decades, interviewing the most famous people in the world, and then writing this book about it. So we have some books left for purchase. Some of you have pre-purchased books, and Ruth was kind enough to sign them. And Ram, where are those books for the people there at the front of the house? Sorry? In the bookstore, if you want to purchase it. If you pre-purchase books, where do they pick up their pre-purchase books? They already got it. Amazing.
And if I may add, you can also get the book on Amazon or through Grizzly Peak Press, which has been my wonderful publisher. So it's very easy to purchase online. Should you be so inspired?
And you are welcome to stay for our next program, which is an interview with the director of the San Francisco Department of Planning, new-ish director of planning. We're going to talk about the planning department, the future of the city, housing, development, climate change,
Van Ness Avenue.
So you're welcome to stay for that. That's gonna happen in 5 minutes. If you're not already a Manny sponsor, it is very much the way you can keep us alive and keep our programming going. It's $36 a month or more if you're interested. And you can go to welcometomannys.com to become a sponsor, or you can find Precious or myself afterwards. And thank you for keeping us alive and allowing us to do the work we do. Yes, please.
This is just such a wonderful venue, such a great thing that Manny's done for the city, so.
All right, round of applause for Ruth and onwards. Follow.
That's one of the things that haunts me. I feel
I know, I was so confused.